The Los Angeles Rams did in fact have a draft. Contrary to popular belief, they did draft. Just because you were taking a nap when they were making all their picks does not mean that they didn't in fact draft. And in fact, again, you look at all the players they drafted, they still got a decent number of players. They got 8 players, which is more than the average team would get, except for comp picks. So the average team actually gets more than 7 players. But again, that's where things get weird. Still, 8 players here. This is what the Rams have historically done. They consistently do this, where they have a draft, they trade away their first and all of their top 100 picks they have, get rid of them to get some talent. And then what they do is they go out and they draft players who are typically like solid players. They've gotten like solid starting players in later on in the draft consistently. And it seems like it's a conscious effort to, instead of going with developmental guys that have high ceilings, they go with low floor guys who they feel can be plug and play starters. And that's been a big piece of how they've been able to have this great run. So starting off with Logan Bruss, or is it Bruce? I don't know. We'll say Bruce. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I remember I had an Albanian friend in middle school whose name was spelled Brus, but it was pronounced Bruce. So we'll go with that. I could have just Googled it, but this is more fun. Logan Bruss here at pick 104. He was 169 on the consensus big board. Seems like an interesting player who, his kind of a guy who, so as an offensive tackle, run blocked well, did not pass block particularly well. He seems like a pure depth guy for me. So a little surprising to see the Rams use their first pick on someone who they suspect will just be a depth guy. But that's what I ended up going with here. And again, if there is a team who can do it, it probably is the Los Angeles Rams. I know they can't, there's not too much they can do to fully improve their roster at this point, but getting good depth is still important. What they then went on to do is go after Jacoby Durant, who is someone who, so people are going to get turned off by his height and weight at 6'2", 165. One team that, a lot of teams will have like cutoffs. So if you're smaller than this, we're not drafting you. If you're shorter than this, we're not drafting you. The Rams do not, which by the Tutu Atwell draft previously. I think the fact that he is so skinny at 6'2" is a big concern for some people, but he was, good at a small school level. So could he be good at the NFL level? He already is 24. He is someone who you might run some running plays to him because he's not going to make too many tackles at 165. That's a very fair thing. However, there's reason to be optimistic about him, and they could use a corner, although they did also, another aspect was the trade in all of this. They ended up getting former Ram Troy Hill from the Browns for a 5th-round pick, so he's probably going to be, the slot guy. Maybe Durant can be someone who can play on the outside, perhaps. It's an interesting pick, and at 142, it's worth taking a chance on that. Kyren Williams, another guy who, really good runner of the football for sure. He is someone who I could see having success in this offense. So Cam Akers didn't look great when he came back from the injury, but they weren't blocking particularly well for him either in a couple of those playoff games. So I don't know how much I want to blame it on him necessarily, but you could always use a running back. And again, with the 164th pick, that this is when you draft running backs, I have no issue with this. Quentin Lake, who is another guy who is, someone who has very athletic, might not be the most explosive, but seems like a smart safety. And again, he could legitimately end up being a starting safety for them in the 6th round, which is crazy, but like they could use safeties and you can get quality safeties later on in the draft, which is fascinating. Darian Kendrick, a cornerback from Georgia, is another guy who, not the biggest, 190 at 6 feet tall. So he's certainly not quite Durant level of, Durant looks like Kevin Durant out there with how skinny he is. Not quite the same with Kendrick. So that's kind of fascinating. Could be another corner who could play. But again, when we're talking pick 212, I always wonder, is this a special teams pick? Although the consensus big board was higher on him than a lot of other people were. The consensus big board had him at 139. NFL has him at 212. So who is right, who is wrong, who knows? They then go with Daniel Hardy here at 840. So a couple of guys who are, fringe top 400 prospects, according to the consensus big board. So I'm going to be honest, I haven't spent a ton of time evaluating all of these guys, but they're fascinating. They might end up being special teams guys. Although, again, Daniel Hardy Hardy was a defensive end. So kind of looks like he's maybe more, from what I've read about him, kind of more of a speed rusher who is unpolished. Maybe someone that you can, he is that traits-based prospect that I say the Rams typically avoid, but maybe with him, they will not do that. Russ Yeast, another guy who, again, smaller defensive back at 5'10", 195. So smaller guy, kind of a safety type. Again, might be a special teams guy. He's probably the one guy I could see being special teams. And then at 261, AJ Akuri here. And he's an offensive lineman who, I don't know. I don't really have that much about him. Feels like he's just a pure depth player for me. So that's the Rams draft. Some interesting picks here. Again, the Rams draft was never going to be the most exciting, but this is what the Rams do. The Rams draft was, hey, we have Matthew Stafford. We won a Super Bowl. Let's celebrate. Like, that's the Rams draft, I think. So that's kind of what makes them good. And this is what they consistently do. And I'm sure I'll look back on on this video in 2 years and say, oh yeah, like 3 of these guys are about to get paid $10+ million a year. None of them are Pro Bowlers, but you got a few solid players. So the one most interesting player for me is Jacoby Durant. I think he's very fascinating. We'll be interested to see how his career pans out and how all these guys' career pans out. So that's my thought on the Rams draft. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.